For someone whose entire career has been focused on joy, why a podcast on pain? Because these stories need to be told. A good phoenix rising out of the ashes story reminds us all that not only can we survive, we can thrive. And when we emerge, we're different. That's the alchemy of pain. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Alchemy of Pain. I'm Brenda Viola, and I started this podcast because I went through a bunch of painful stuff myself. And boy, I could have used a lifeline, hearing stories about other people who had been through what I had and made it through, and not just made it through, but came out better somehow. We're not Pollyannas here. We know that hard times can be very painful, and we're not trying to minimize that at all, but we do want to shine a light that helps you through the darkness. My guest today is Danny Goldberg. He is a motivational speaker, but I'm also intrigued by the fact that he is a consultant that helps companies better help their employees deal with grief-filled situations, making the workplace more of a human place. And so my first question to you, Danny, first of all, thank you for being here, but how did you get into that kind of work?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, first of all. Really through lived experience, and I'm sure we'll dive into it on the show today, but my dad passed away when I was 20 years old, and my mom passed away when I was 25 years old. And when I was 21, I started a business where I helped consumer brands manufacture products overseas, and I loved what I did. But after my mom died when I was 25, it really made me look inwards, and a lot in my life personally changed in regards to the work I wanted to do, what was important to me, the way that I was building my life. And I felt in on one hand that I didn't have the full support from my then business partner. And I realized that, hey, there's a lot of people who are going through a similar thing. And it made me want to go and help them to make sure that they never had to go through what I was going through.
So when you say what you're going through, look, many people, everyone at some point experiences loss. But I want to first go back before we get to that. Pretty young guy to have started his own business. Is entrepreneurialism just in your DNA?
Yeah, so it actually starts before when I was 21. When I was 14 years old, I started my first business selling boxing gloves. Um, my dad was a big inspiration of mine for starting my business. I was on a family vacation, and my dad was an industrial designer by trade. And I turned to him and I said, "Hey, Dad, how do I build something great in life?" We were in the hot tub on this family vacation. He said, "Find what you love, and you'll find something great." And at that time, I loved boxing. Was training for my first amateur boxing fight. I was working at the local boxing gym. And about 15 minutes later, I left the hot tub with two things: a business plan and a dream. And I was off to the races. I mean, when I got home from that family trip, I had already placed an order with a manufacturer in Thailand, and I had a few boxes of equipment on the way over. And yeah, like about 4 weeks later, I had a truck show up with boxes of boxing gloves, and I took them to the gym and started selling them, and the business took off that way.
14 years old.
Yeah.
What 14-year-old says? I think every parent wants a 14-year-old to say, how do I build something great in life? Were you just way ahead of were you a 40-year-old man in a 14-year-old body?
Something like that. I found it to be, I definitely had a unique childhood in that sense, but it became like my sport. It became my hobby. It was the thing that I loved to do. On weekends, my parents would drive me around because I was 14. I didn't have my permit yet. Couldn't drive. I live in New York, so couldn't drive yet. My parents would drive me around, and I'd fill up this big duffel with boxing gloves and boxing equipment, and they take me to all the local gyms. And I used to tell them, like, "Hey, I'll give you a ring when the bag's empty. You can come and get me." But I loved it. Really, so I ran the business from 2009 till 2015, where I ultimately sold it to my largest customer. And I loved, like, in my childhood, I got to do these incredible things where I would travel all over the world selling the boxing gloves. I got to train alongside my favorite fighters. I made equipment for world champion boxers. So as someone who loved the sport, still loved the sport, but as someone who loved the sport as a kid, I got to be around these fighters who I really looked up to, and that was just such a unique experience. And I have my dad to really thank for that, because he pushed me and really inspired and empowered me to pursue my childhood dreams. And at the time, that it was that business.
So, what a gift to have two parents that not only allowed you to dream, but helped you pursue it. And I guess, Danny, that's why the loss was so great.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think perhaps, yeah, for sure. I think all loss is loss, and but absolutely, I had a really unique, uh, deep, special bond with both my parents. My dad, I felt like he was my best friend. I mean, when I look back, like, when we were building the business, he would travel, not always, because he had a regular full time job, but when the opportunity allowed, he would travel with me into these trade shows. And we went to Boston, Vegas. We went to Thailand to visit the manufacturer who made us the equipment. And he was an overweight guy, but he tried to really get involved in the sport because he saw how much I loved it. And he used to come to the gym and we would spar. And yeah, so there's just, I have so many memories of um, and had this deep connection with my dad because of the business that we were building together.
So, you could have rode that train all the way, but interestingly, it wasn't his death. And by the way, I am so sorry for your losses. I am.
Mm.
I understand. I've been there. But it wasn't until your mom passed away that it seemed like that was the catalyst. What
Yeah,
do you think?
so
What happened in those years that shifted you?
yeah, so when after my dad died, um, when my dad was alive, the way I viewed success and what I was doing was, it was just about passion. It was about, like, I loved what I was doing. I loved the work I was doing. I liked the impact I was having, and I liked that I got to do it with my dad. After he died, I really redefined how I viewed personal success, and I started to really shift into focusing around from like life success to money and financial success. And part of it came from um, a good place. When I look back, I wanted to help take care of my mom, and so I became really focused around this idea of just like success equals financial success, success equals money. So I sold my business to my largest customer to go and pursue other opportunities. And I ultimately started, there was a slew of businesses in the middle, but I ultimately started a business when I was 21 where I helped consumer brands manufacture products. And um, that business took off way faster. It was a way better business in terms of dollars and cents. Um, but ultimately, I knew that, like, that wasn't going to be the forever business. But a lot of my own identity was built around that business. And after my mom died, I took a beat and I really started to just assess, like, life as a whole. And I started to look at my life more holistically around the things that are important to me in my life, not just my business. Because at that time, if you asked me, when I was 23, when my mom was alive, if you asked me what was important to me, it was my business, and it was about making money. That was like the crux of what I was focused on. After she died, I wanted to go and have an impact on other people's life. I wanted to go and integrate and find the integrate and bring the things that were really important to me to the forefront of my life, and not just focus on my business and my career. So I really tried to build. I started working with a coach, and I started to build a much richer and more fulfilling life. And along that journey, my then business partner really wanted me to focus just on the business, and it was not going to work for me anymore. I had started my own podcast to help people live more intentionally, and I quickly realized, like, this is the work that I really want to be doing. So I ultimately left my business in this past December to pursue this new work now.
So your mom passes, and one of the things that fueled your desire for financial success was so that you could take care of her. And then she passes. And so I'm thinking that those things somehow connected. And
It's after my mom died, it was like the first time in 5 years. Like when my mom was alive, after my dad died, I was so focused on becoming financially successful for her. And after she died, it was the first time in 5 years that I said, like, oh, what's the life that I actually want to live? What are the things that are important to me? Um, and especially looking through the lens of death, um, I'd say like the thing that really helped me take action today and not someday was I started to really look at just the fragility in life, and knowing how fragile life is. I started to say, how and where do I want to spend my limited time? And it wasn't in the business I was building. It was an opportunity to go and help positively impact other people.
I want to sit on this for just a minute, because what's very cool about this story is it's not that all the preceding things were wrong. They were stepping stones, building blocks to get you to your awakening of your life's purpose. And you know what? You're 30 years old. That may shift and evolve. It will, I promise you, for the rest of your life. But how important is it for every person to say, what is the life I want to live? Because
Yeah,
we're all
100%.
so often on the hamster wheel, and we're just not thinking about the life we want to live. We're just living it, but we're not living it.
100%. I think it's interesting. It's interesting to hear you bring that up, but I think all too often, um, most people, like when I look back in my early 20s, even in my late teens when my dad was alive, like including my parents, they never stopped and asked me to think about what does a successful life look like to me. And now that's something that like I will sit with and I will think about over and over again. Like you said, it will my own mission and my own purpose will evolve with time. But I try to lean into like the successful life, my definition of that. Whatever that is to me, I try to lean into that and align the things I'm doing so they're aligned with that definition.
Well, I will say this, whenever you talk about what you are currently doing, your face does this thing like that. It literally comes from the inside out. And it's a beautiful thing. One of my missions is to help people get in touch with themselves, and hopefully sooner rather than later. I always tell people it took me 50 plus years to finally realize that I needed to have a relationship with myself and be in tune with what I needed and what I wanted. And that's not selfish, because when you answer those questions, you can serve then in a
Mm.
way that's free and fulfilling. So, how did this awakening for you parlay into this work that you now do? And I'm talking about this building grief programs into corporate cultures. I'm intrigued by that. How do you do that?
Yeah, well, so I'm really just starting the journey. As I mentioned, I left my business a year ago. Um, so I am literally at the infancy, but this past year I've started working with organizations, companies, nonprofits, schools to go in and speak around making the workplace a more human place. And part of that is part of the work that I'm doing very specifically is around grief at work. And one of the things that I became like hyper aware about in doing a lot of research around the subject is just how really poor our policy is around grief in our nation as it relates to grief at work. Um, Unfortunately, um, loss happens to everyone, but as leaders and as corporations, we're so underprepared and undertrained to support our people on a human level. It's partly some of the things that I experienced when I was in my previous business after my mom died. So um, there is so much work to be done in helping create grief smart workplaces and just more empathy, compassion, and making the workplace more human. Bring back that human side to work.
Mm. I will never forget when I lost my partner and my mom within months of each other. And my employer at the time, they were so kind and they gave me space, unfortunately, that I didn't take. Like I
Mm,
thought if I got right back to work, that life could be normal again sooner. And it really wasn't. That was me kind of ignoring my feelings and just saying, just, pay no attention and just keep going, Brenda. But my employer kept urging me, Brenda, take time, which is a rare and beautiful thing. And what did that evoke? A loyalty and a love for that employer that transcended the employee employer relationship. I mean, when you take care of your people, they truly will take care of you. And I think that's so important to stress with the companies that you're working with. This is going to end up benefiting you if you take care.
yes, 100%. And what's been interesting is as I've started to like speak publicly about some of my own experiences and the issues around just grief at work, um, the overwhelming messages that I've been getting around bad experiences and frustrating experiences, it's disappointing to hear people who are in leadership positions who are running organizations that they don't have like the empathy, the compassion, or just like the human side to them to support the people who are helping build their organizations. It's awesome to hear that it sounds like the organization that you were working with gave you a gift. And I always say the leadership team, the organization, the policy, the company has the opportunity to give their people a gift or a curse, and there's real repercussions and consequences, if you're not building a people first workplace.
Well said. And I also think this is a little out of the box, but grief is a product of loss. And I think of all the people who have been laid off, they've lost their positions. And oftentimes, what we do is so inseparably linked to our identities as human beings. I'm thinking grief counseling and grief programs go way beyond just the loss of a spouse or a parent or a child, which are awful in themselves, but any loss, the loss of a marriage, the loss of
Yeah,
a job, the loss of those things that created our identity. Grief is not just limited to someone's death.
1,000%. People now more than ever are coming to work as their whole self. They don't just show up to work and, hey, I'm going to go do my job and then I'm going to go home and live my outside life. They show up to work as their whole self, and people show up with a slew of personal problems and personal things, hardships that they're working through at any one point. And there's so much more than just the death of a loved one. Like you mentioned, divorce, breakup, a struggling friendship, loss of a job. There's so many things that we lose that impact the way that we show up to work and our life that need to be addressed.
So, when you're in the middle of a loss, it's very hard to find the silver lining and actually maybe not even helpful. You need to just sit with it and feel it, absolutely. But so often loss is followed up with some sort of gain you would have never gotten any other way. I feel like that's your story.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, I think that specifically around like the loss of a loved one, I think there is no right or wrong way to grieve. It is a journey. It's a process that you move through. I think you definitely can move forward. You don't necessarily ever move on. But there is no right or wrong way. I have two older sisters, and like our experiences around loss has been so different with all of us. Um, but I do think for me, there's definitely been a lot of gifts and grief. Perhaps one of the biggest things for me is just the consciousness around the fragility in life and one thing that is kind of like a constant loop in my head is knowing that tomorrow isn't guaranteed. How and where do I want to spend my limited time today? And I try to really step into that every single day to do the things that I want to do today, to not possibly push them off to someday and then never get to experience them. So that is one of probably the biggest gifts that I've learned or woke up to as a result of the loss of my parents.
And we're all benefiting. We're all benefiting from you sharing your gift and serving in this capacity. So people, what kind of groups do you speak to as a motivational speaker? I know that this is sort of a new iteration in your life, a new chapter, but if people want to contact you to come and speak to their organization or their group, or they want to work with you in a corporate capacity, how do people find you?
Yeah, so they can find me on my website, which is dannygoldbergspeaks.com. And right now I'm typically speaking to either HR organizations, leadership teams, or ERG groups within larger organizations that are focused on mental health and wellness at work.
And what would you say to someone listening right now who's in the midst of that painful experience? How would you encourage them?
Yeah, you don't need to go at it alone. You don't need to go through it alone. After my dad died, I stumbled into an organization called Experience Camps, which is a free 1 week camp for kids that have lost a loved one. And I've been involved with that for the last decade. And um, through that, I found community of um, kids that I get to serve every single year, who have experienced their own significant loss. But also, I found community in people who have experienced, and you can volunteer for the organization. You don't need to have experienced your own loss. But through that, I've connected with so many people who have experienced loss. And I remember after my dad died, finding that community helped me so much because I no longer felt like I was alone. So I think community really has such a tremendous impact. But granted, I think to counter that, I think some people aren't, some people don't want to openly talk about their grief in a group setting. And I think if that is more like you, I still think finding a therapist or someone, a coach that you can lean on and talk openly. I think grief is kind of like a box that with all your feelings that you stuff inside this box. And I think over time, trying to find ways to open that box little by little can really help you work through your own grief.
That is such an important point. And I do feel like we need to acknowledge the adorable dog in the back of your screen. Please introduce us.
Yes, that's Luna sleeping
Luna.
away.
Luna is very chill through the whole experience of the interview. I want to touch on one thing because I could talk to you for a really long time and your time is valuable. And I know you have to go, but you mentioned identity. And, there was a period in your life where you got your identity from being an entrepreneurial success and creating financial wealth. And I read somewhere, and this has been something I've been chewing on, that to change anything in your life, you have to change your identity. You have to change how you see yourself. I'll give you an example. So for years, I'm like, I don't like gym class. This is from grade school. I don't really like to exercise. And so I had this identity. And then I turned 60 and it was like, I need to change that identity because the studies have shown that you need to build muscle if you want to be here for the long haul, and you need to exercise. And I went from walking into the gym sort of like, oh no, what am I doing here, to being addicted to going to the gym every day. So you can change, but I first had to change in my head. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. You definitely, I think at any point you can change the direction of your life. Um, the way that you identify yourself in terms of the work you do, the things you want to do, the life you want to lead. I think, and we didn't touch upon it so much in this episode, but I think that is why being hyper intentional around how and where you spend your limited time, and defining your successful life, whatever that is to you. And like you mentioned at the beginning, that will definitely evolve. At 20 years old, what you define as success will be different than when you're 30, 40, 50, etc. But I think having that benchmark of this is my definition of my successful life, and being hyper intentional and doing the things you want to do to get you there, is so important. Because when you're on your journey early on in your 20s, the things you might be doing might be very different than when you're in your 30s. And I talk to so many people who are in their 30s, who are or even 40s, and they've been doing the same thing for 10 years, 20 years, and then they say, I can't go backwards. I can't take a step backwards to change the course of my life now. I'm too far deep. I've already spent all this money on school, etc. But you can, like, there's no rules to follow. At any one point, you can redefine your life, the work you do, the life you live, how you show up in life. Like, those are all things that you can change. And change doesn't happen at the snap of the fingers, but little by little, you could take one step, one foot in front of the other, and change your life. And I think partly it's what's really exciting to me about this new direction of my life. The last basically decade of my life, I was Danny Goldberg, the entrepreneur, the founder. I helped start, build, sell small businesses, and I am on this completely different journey now, which is so exciting to me. Partly because of the impact that I know I'm having and will have, but partly also because I am going to be that example for others, that you can redefine your life at any one point. I and I know I'm a little bit rambly here, but I really think it is so important, because just on my own journey, when I was in my business only a year ago, and I told people I want to pursue speaking, I want to create a body of work to help people navigate their own grief in their life, and bring a human side to the workplace. People said, Danny, you are crazy. I had friends, family, peers say, like, you can't leave behind the business you just built. I mean, you worked so hard on building that thing. And now here I am. I left the business and I'm pursuing the thing. And it certainly is a step back in many ways, but it is a new direction. And yeah, I'm excited to make it all happen, because I know that someone will hear this and they'll know that, hey, it doesn't matter that I'm 35, 45, 55. I can take one step in front of the other and make that change a reality.
And you're doing it. And that's why I wanted to interview you. I am so honored that you joined me today. It feels like you're telling your story, and it is almost like the other side of the baloney of my story. I will say to our audience, whenever there is a dream in your heart to do something, there will be many people that say you're crazy. I had a very good job. I had a very peaceful life. I owned a home. I had my circle, and I blew it all up because my life blew up, and it required a response. And it was either, well, you can do the same thing you've always done and get the same results, or you can build a life. It all goes back to that very question that you started with. How do I want my life to be? How do I do something great in life? What's it all about? And how do I get there? At age 60, it wasn't too late for me. I heard of people in their 70s and beyond who reinvented themselves. You can redefine your life. Danny Goldberg is proof that at 30, you can get it. The lights can come on and you can say, I want to do something completely different. And I'm excited to see what you're going to do, Danny. Like, we'll look back on this interview and how your career and how your service in this world evolves. I'm rooting for you. I think it's wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, life is meant to be lived. So, I mean, applaud to yourself. That's incredible to hear on your own journey. At 60, you decided to make the change that you wanted as well. I mean, that's shining a light for other people.
Yeah, that's why I seem to connect with people who similarly hear, what are you, crazy? And they say, well, maybe, but I'm doing it anyhow. So I wish you, Danny, all the success in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
anybody's listening, if you represent a company and you could really use someone to come in and show you how to be more human as an organization, or to help deal with grief better in the workplace, or if you need a motivational speaker for your next event, reach out to Danny. Thanks for your time, Danny.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, everybody. Have a great day.